Welcome to this new automotive news video for Saturday, July 4th, 2026. On today's agenda, we'll talk about Dacia, which will lower the price of its cars to better compete with Chinese rivals, and Volkswagen, which will launch a complete overhaul of its electric car lineup, and Mazda, which confirms what many feared regarding the engine of its future MX-5. A new French study finds electric car repairs are still much costlier than gasoline car repairs. I hope you'll find this video interesting. If that's the case, as usual, I'm counting on you to show that by leaving a like, subscribing for my next videos, boosting this one, and of course by leaving a comment where you share your opinion on today's news. The bad news has just come in. The next Mazda MX-5 could very well be the last one with a gasoline engine in its entire history. That's at least what one of the brand's executives suggested. A statement that resonates especially now as environmental regulations are getting stricter all over the world. Behind the scenes, the manufacturer is already preparing the fifth generation called NE. True to the model's DNA, it would keep a naturally aspirated gasoline engine, bigger than the one in the current generation. To finish in style, an engine called Skyactiv Z, with a displacement of 2 to 2.5 liters compared to 2 liters for the current generation. Paired with a 6-speed manual gearbox, rear-wheel drive, and a target weight of under 1,000 kilos, a slight micro-hybrid system is being considered to contain CO2 emissions. But nothing has been confirmed yet on this subject. This idea of a final gasoline-powered MX-5 makes perfect sense with the European targets, which require manufacturers to reduce their average CO2 emissions by 90% by 2035. For a small manufacturer like Mazda, which does not yet have a sufficiently developed electric lineup to offset the emissions of a gasoline roadster, keeping a gasoline-powered MX-5 in the lineup beyond this new NE generation could become extremely difficult. The timeline reinforces this impression even more, since this new Skyactiv Z engine won't launch until late 2027 first, under the hood of the CX-5 hybrid, which means that the future MX-5 is therefore not expected, most likely before 2028, and if its life cycle is as long as that of the previous generations, it could accompany enthusiasts through much of the 2030s before finally closing the chapter on gasoline-powered MX-5S for good. Of course, by then, it's possible that European rules on CO2 emissions will be further relaxed. But if they aren't, it's hard to see how Mazda could decide to invest in developing a future MX-5 after the next generation, NE, if it's only going to be on the market for 2 or 3 years. While waiting for this new generation, Mazda is still making improvements to the current MX-5 called the ND, which was launched more than 10 years ago. These changes aren't meant to improve the Roadster's performance, but have become essential simply to allow it to stay on the market, especially so it can meet future regulations. To reduce noise, the engineers fitted it with quieter tires and a larger muffler, which brings the vehicle's noise level down from 74 decibels to 68. An extra muffler that takes up space in the already small trunk of the current MX-5. It's quite symbolic. On one hand, we have Mazda getting ready to release probably the last gasoline-powered MX-5 in history, and on the other, they're still carefully refining the current generation to give it a few great final years before it disappears. By the way, speaking of disappearing, let's talk about Dacia, which really has a lot to worry about. The brand is going through a particularly tough period. After a difficult first quarter, the manufacturer admits it hasn't managed to catch up. Orders for the second quarter are down another 7 to 8% compared to the same quarter in 2025. In France, registrations dropped by 10% in the first half of the year compared to the first half of 2025 and by 12.4% in Europe. Even worse over the first 5 months of 2026 compared once again to the same period in 2025. As a result, the market share dropped from 9 to 8% in France and from 4.5 to 3.7% in Europe. The reason is very simple. Competition is becoming fierce. Chinese manufacturers are producing more well-equipped SUVs at aggressive prices. For example, the Automotive 5 hybrid from Chery, which starts at 28,000 euros with 220 horsepower compared to 155 horsepower for a Dacia Victor hybrid at about the same price. In addition to Chinese competition, there's also Stellantis, which has decided to slash its prices, with the Pandina, which is now sold for less than 10,000 euros, thanks to various discounts offered by the brand. Or even the Grande Panda or the new Corsa, offered at less than 16,000 euros. An offensive move that puts direct pressure on the Sandero, which has so far been offered starting at 13,290 euros. The brand is struggling with its slow entry into electric vehicles, offering only the China-made Spring, which doesn't qualify for government EV incentives. Dacia has decided not to give up, and is preparing a counterattack with several pleasant surprises. Since July 1st, orders for the new Sandero hybrid have been open, starting at 19,900 euros. With 155 horsepower, its launch has been moved up by 2 months to try to get back on track a little. The brand has also just strengthened its LPG offering, with an LPG Sandero starting at 16,150 euros. It's a fuel whose price remains about half that of unleaded. This push will accelerate starting in mid-October, as Dacia will soon open orders for the brand new Striker Coupe SUV, which is 4.6 meters long, with a price under 25,000 euros. The Spring 2, which will be based on the Twingo and should be sold starting at 18,000 euros. A new Sandero will go on sale in 2028, offered for the first time as a fully electric model. Dacia will also change its pricing strategy. This will happen through two measures that Dacia has just taken. The first is that Dacia has given up, thanks to them, very generous, right? Of course, to the traditional annual price increase, which normally takes place in July. This year, they're giving it up. So the price of Dacias will not go up, in principle, until July 2027, unless, let's say, there is a particularly bad economic situation or a major change in strategy at Dacia. Discounts will also be increased. Until now, they stayed below 3% in order to preserve the resale value of these vehicles. It's true that thanks to this, Dacias don't lose too much value on the used car market. Dacia will increase discounts starting in September, especially on its hybrid cars, so we should see their prices drop by several hundred or maybe even several thousand euros, depending on the models involved, with a clear goal to preserve its image as an affordable brand. Because today, Dacia models are only 5% cheaper than Chinese cars in France, a gap that is shrinking dangerously and is forcing the Romanian manufacturer to react. To maintain its status as the benchmark for affordable European cars, it must act. Volkswagen was also forced to respond. Volkswagen was starting to admit that its electric car strategy wasn't the right one. Everything points to that since the German manufacturer is continuing a deep overhaul of its electric lineup, with a change in direction that goes beyond a simple facelift. The first model affected will be the current ID.4, which will finally drop its name and become just the ID Tiggan. This will happen by the end of the year, a choice Volkswagen is making to rely on names already familiar to its customers, rather than continuing to develop an entirely separate lineup under the ID name, which doesn't mean much to most people. The goal is to simplify the lineup by aligning electric models with their combustion engine counterparts. The ID prefix will remain to identify the fully electric versions, but iconic names like Golf, Polo, Tiggan, and Passat will return to the core of its strategy. We might wonder what will happen to the ID.3, which wasn't renamed ID.3 since the ID.3 is already coming. This model will likely become redundant in the lineup and eventually be phased out, a change that won't just affect the names of the vehicles, since the future ID Tiguan will undergo a complete transformation. Its design will be boxier, inspired by the combustion engine Tiguan, but will keep its own identity. The flush door handles will be replaced by traditional handles, mainly to anticipate future Chinese and potentially European regulations, which are expected to ban this type of handle fairly soon. Volkswagen has also confirmed that it will reintroduce more physical buttons inside its cars to improve ergonomics. On the other hand, when it comes to technology, Volkswagen is still seriously lagging behind, since the next ID.4 will indeed adopt new LFP batteries, with motor power remaining unchanged. But most importantly, the electrical architecture will still be 400 volts. The 800-volt architecture was reserved for a future generation, expected around 2031. It's already been 2 to 3 years since Chinese brands and some premium European brands like BMW switched to 800 volts. Volkswagen is already 3 years behind on this, and it's going to last another 5 years, which is pretty hard to understand. Volkswagen appears eager to address several widely criticized decisions since the launch of its electric lineup, signaling a strategic shift that could be pivotal for the brand. If Volkswagen is revising its strategy today, it's not just to sell more electric cars, it's also because now drivers are looking at the overall cost of these models, and a new study is likely to reignite the debate. Though electric cars are said to be cheaper to maintain, the reality is often quite different when they need repairs after an accident. A new study conducted by France Assureur is reigniting the debate. By comparing 9 identical models where only the powertrain changes, the findings are clear. In 8 of 9 cases, repairing the fully electric version costs more than the gasoline version. Only the previous generation Twingo, the Twingo 3, is the exception, with an identical repair index. These figures confirm major national studies, such as the one conducted by the SRA, which is a French organization that analyzes the different repair costs of vehicles to let insurance companies accurately set their premiums. According to SRA, which relies on 800,000 expert reports, electric cars cost on average 14 to 14.3% more to repair than the rest of the fleet. That number is going down, it's true, since it was 15 in 2024, but still, 14 more is quite a significant amount. The same observation at France Assureur, which analyzes nearly 2 million vehicles repairs. Electric cars average 11% more expensive than combustion models for 3 reasons. First, they're about 41% heavier, increasing accident damage. Next, because these cars generally have more technology on board, sensors, electronics, components that are expensive to replace. Also, the labor cost is higher to repair an electric car, for the simple reason that, in general, they are not repaired by small independent garages, which are cheaper, but by dealership service centers, which for now are among the only garages in France with the proper accreditations to work on electric cars. In any case, whether it's a hybrid, a combustion engine, or an electric car, experts believe that the cost of car repairs is likely to skyrocket even more in the coming years, especially because cars are becoming more and more technological, with more and more equipment and devices that are very, very expensive and increasingly costly to repair. Which means that soon we won't even be asking whether an electric car is more expensive to repair than a combustion engine car, but simply whether we can afford to repair our car at all. We'll see what the future holds on this topic. In any case, we've covered all the news for today. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, as always, I count on you to show it by leaving a like, subscribing for future videos, and supporting the channel by clicking the join button. I'll see you tomorrow for the last video of the week. Bye.